Got the wrong lipstick on, mister.
Raymond Chandler. In the 1930s and 40s, this writer of hard-boiled pulp fiction and movie whodunits created an image of L.A. as a dark and dangerous place, a cruel city where the filthy rich cross paths with the dirty rotten.
You've never seen me before tonight.
Every guy's seen you before. Somewhere. The trick is to find you.
The inspiration for Chandler's works came from his own destructive lifestyle. Like his signature character, Philip Marlowe, Chandler was a loner, a drinker, and a cynic. Still, his colorful contributions to the gumshoe genre are as vivid today as when he first put pen to paper.
On this episode of Mysteries and Scandals, we'll get to know the tortured man behind the typewriter.
There's a celebrated story about him riding the Blue Dahlia drunk for a week so that he would finish the script, because he said he had to be drunk in order to finish it.
We'll hear about the colorful woman behind the man.
She was involved in some kind of opium-taking, sort of nude, arty modeling scene.
And we'll explore how Chandler crossed the line between genius and madness.
He got totally roaring drunk and got in a bathtub and shot off a gun.
Plus, we'll reveal Chandler's vision of a city that had nothing to do with trendy boulevards and sun-drenched beaches.
He didn't always write about Los Angeles in pretty terms by any means. He often would say things like, I smelled Los Angeles before I saw it.
I'm A.J. Benza. Join me as we take a trip through the mean streets of Los Angeles and trace the footsteps of the master of mystery, Raymond Chandler. On March 23, 1959, the book was closed on 71-year-old author and screenwriter Raymond Chandler. The high priest of Pulp surrendered to pneumonia in a La Jolla, California hospital after a furious final binge of heavy drinking.
Tom Heine is the author of Raymond Chandler, a biography.
He died without family. He left his estate to his agent, and 17 people attended his funeral. And it was a very lonely end to a very lonely life.
The Raymond Chandler story began in Chicago on July 23, 1888.
He was the son of a rail engineer and an Irish woman. His father disappeared from Chandler's life when he was at the age of 7, and his mother brought him back to Ireland, and Chandler never saw his father again.
In 1895, Chandler and his mother Florence moved to England, where Raymond grew up, went to school, and developed an unusually close attachment to Mom. After leaving school, Raymond thought about becoming a lawyer, but he switched gears and became a poet and a writer instead.
He, or rather his guardian, decided that he was really going nowhere as far as supporting himself, and Chandler decided to emigrate to America.
Elizabeth Ward is co-author of Raymond Chandler's Los Angeles.
It was suggested that he go work with his uncle in a hardware store in St. Louis, I believe. I think he just took it up as an idea of a way out of England and to see the world, and the ticket was offered him.
But the Midwest didn't hold much appeal for Chandler, and his stay in St. Louis was brief. Raymond began working his way west, and in 1913, Chandler landed in Los Angeles, where he quickly sent for his mother. By 1918, World War I was raging. Raymond, who had dual citizenship, enlisted with the Canadian Army and led a battalion against enemy fire.
Drink became a balm to help heal the sights of some of what he had seen in the war, and he never was able to give it up as his prop. The First World War really revealed to Chandler the details of human death. They gave him details that he would use later in his crime fiction, so the viscosity of blood from a fatal head wound, or the way a man's eyes look after he's been shot.
After the war, Chandler ended up back in L.A. In 1922, Raymond put his writing career on hold and got into the oil business.
And he really happened to join the industry at the ideal time, and Chandler ballooned with it, not making a personal fortune because he had no stake in the industry.
34-year-old Chandler had a great job, but he was still sharing a home with his mother. Then he got dizzy with a married dame who was 17 years his senior. Cecilia Hurlburt was a strong woman with a murky past.
She was involved in some kind of opium-taking, sort of nude, arty modeling scene. She was married to her second husband when Chandler met her out in Los Angeles. Clearly a very sharp woman, and one who Chandler definitely was very in love with.
In 1924, Raymond's mom died. Within weeks, Chandler was married to the now divorced Sissy. Author Jim Hyman wrote Sins of the City.
I don't know if it's looking for a mother figure, but it certainly is looking for someone who could provide some kind of guidance and kind of anchor him in a period that he was, you know, truly kind of adrift.
Chandler's rise within the corporate world was accompanied by his alcoholism, and after one sort of drunken spell of absenteeism, too many, he was sacked at the height of the Great Depression, which was a very bad time for anyone to be sacked.
Great Depression also described 44-year-old Chandler's mood at the time.
He had been cheating on his wife. His wife knew of this. He'd been, in fact, separated from his wife for a while in the months leading up to his eventual breakdown. He had no income. He had no family to whom he could resort at this point in his life. He had annoyed his friends enough so that he had very few of those, and in fact, no one, it would appear, sort of saw him regularly in the immediate spell after his sacking.
Raymond took off for Washington State to do some soul searching. After laying low and laying off the sauce for 3 months, 45-year-old Chandler returned to L.A., reconciled with his 63-year-old wife, and decided to become a writer of crime fiction. When we come back, Raymond Chandler walks the tightrope between creativity and self-destruction. In 1933, 45-year-old Raymond Chandler decided to fulfill his boyhood dreams by becoming a writer. So he bought a bunch of Pulp Fiction detective magazines and read them cover to cover. Borrowing a little of this and a little of that, Chandler quickly developed his own distinctive writing style.
Chandler used a technique for writing which was to type on quite small pieces of paper, put flatways into his typewriter. They were yellow piece of paper that could only hold 12 or 13 lines, and every page had to have something magic in it, as he described it. His intentions as a writer were to enthrall rather than to impress, and he found that this way of writing kept him on his toes.
Chandler took 5 months to complete his first story, Blackmailers Don't Shoot, which he sold to Black Mask magazine for $180. It's a far cry from the nearly $3 grand a month he had earned in the oil business. But from that point on, the writing began to flow.
And already by the third story, Chandler was starting to find his feet. And soon after that story, he was appearing on the front cover whenever a story came in. And he was quickly acquiring legendary status within the subworld of pulp writers and readers.
In 1939, 51-year-old Chandler published his first novel. While The Big Sleep eventually proved to be Chandler's most successful work, sales were sluggish out of the gate. Still, Raymond's literary creation, Detective Philip Marlowe, became a huge hit with pulp fans.
Philip Marlowe was very much a shady projection of Chandler, and his personal dealings with people make it clear that he and Marlowe were sort of very similar, very antisocial and yet sentimental, cynics and yet optimists in a sort of undefined level.
In addition to Marlowe, Chandler's description of Los Angeles left a lasting impression on readers. Alan Silver co-wrote Raymond Chandler's Los Angeles.
Goes into Marlowe. There's a lot of things that he likes about Los Angeles and a lot of things that he hates. And Full of Big Sleep, which is a pastiche of several other short stories, you have Marlowe driving through the city, but while he's driving he thinks about things and he mixes in what he sees as he's driving. I do think that all of that aspect of Marlowe obviously has a lot to do with how Chandler perceived the city.
He didn't always write about Los Angeles in pretty terms by any means. He often would say things like, "I smelled Los Angeles before I saw it." There ought to be a monument to the man who invented neon.
I think Chandler and Los Angeles and the character Philip Marlowe epitomized what Los Angeles was about for the rest of the world. And the fact that it was filtered through Marlowe's perspective was, I think, unique.
Film director Al Clark wrote Raymond Chandler in Hollywood.
It certainly had a tremendous impact on the city's perception of itself, because until Chandler, it was an under-chronicled town. So he caught it at a moment where, in fiction, it had not yet been given an identity, and he helped irreversibly to create that identity.
Chandler's second novel, Farewell, My Lovely, was published in 1940. Suddenly, Hollywood producers began to see potential in Chandler's plots.
He sold it to RKO for $2,000 for outright. They could do whatever they wanted with it for that. And he was very upset with his then agent for not letting him know and for selling it so cheaply. The first thing that RKO did with Farewell, My Lovely was to adapt it for a franchise of cheap movies it was making at the time, under the character name The Falcon. And although it resembles the novel in some of the narrative aspects, the mood is a world away.
After his experience with RKO, Chandler became the object of a bidding war. Legendary Paramount producer A.C. Lyles remembers how his studio emerged victorious.
Every studio in town wanted Raymond Chandler, and he came here for a lot of reasons. He loved Billy Wilder's work. He thought Alan Ladd was the perfect actor to portray the characters that he had. So we had the ingredients that attracted Raymond Chandler here.
In 1943, Raymond Chandler added screenwriter to his list of credits. When we come back, Chandler takes aim at the Oscar and pulls the trigger on his life. At the age of 55, writer Raymond Chandler signed with Paramount Pictures for what was then a whopping $750 a week. In 1944, the studio executives came up with a brilliant idea to pair Raymond Chandler with legendary director Billy Wilder. It was a rocky relationship that ended up paying big dividends.
There's been talk that he and Billy Wilder did not get along at all when they were making Double Indemnity.
Wilder would pace around the room and make him nervous, and wear a hat as well. And he didn't like that at all. It's a perfect combination, and a writing collaboration where the sparks actually proved to be creative sparks rather than neutralizing ones.
And Fred McMurray and Barbara Stanwyck, my God, their dialogue, it just sizzles.
You afraid, baby?
Yes, I'm afraid. But not of keys. I'm afraid of us.
And I'm sure that Raymond Chandler contributed greatly. Boy, that picture plays so well today.
In 1945, Raymond Chandler and Billy Wilder were nominated for the Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay for Double Indemnity. They didn't win. Chandler came up empty again in 1947 when he was nominated for writing The Blue Dahlia. There's a story behind that movie, too.
And the predicament was this. Their top star, Alan Ladd, had a call-up to the army. So Chandler was really in a position he had never been in before, which was having to finish something to an unnaturally exacting deadline.
There's a celebrated story about him writing The Blue Dahlia, John Houseman basically keeping him drunk for a week so that he would finish the script, because he said he had to be drunk in order to finish it.
The studio had to provide a limousine around the clock, a nurse around the clock. If Chandler slipped into some soused and delirious sleep, there would still be secretaries sitting there, presumably to take down things that he spoke in his sleep.
For Chandler, really, it was the beginning of his demonic drinking, which had sort of been the comeuppance of him once before and was going to be the comeuppance of him again.
It was also in 1946 that The Big Sleep was adapted for the screen. While 58-year-old Chandler didn't actually contribute to the film, he did spend some time on the set with Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall.
Chandler, like most people, was deeply impressed with the filming The Big Sleep. He said in his own mind, he pictured Cary Grant as Marlowe, but he had no problems with Bogart, and it certainly was one of the most sort of memorable Hollywood performances by anyone.
In 1946, just as it seemed Raymond's career was hitting high gear, Chandler's personal life was hitting the skids.
Sissy, who is 17 years older than him, and who's been hiding her age for too long now, is starting to fade away painfully and under a lot of sedatives and requiring a lot of attendance by Chandler.
With Sissy battling illness and Raymond battling booze, the couple decided to move from the big city to the peace and quiet of La Jolla, California.
He spent a lot of time reflecting. Yeah, I think La Jolla was a good place to do that. It was away from Los Angeles. He always wrote a lot of letters back and forth to people and commented sometimes bitterly, sometimes nostalgically on the events of his life. I don't know that he couldn't have done that in LA, but I think La Jolla focused those last years for him.
Not long after they moved, Chandler was approached by renowned Hollywood director Alfred Hitchcock to work on a project, and Chandler couldn't refuse.
He's living in La Jolla with an elderly invalid wife. His life is under quite a bit of strain, and Hitchcock treated him with great deference. He went down to La Jolla to visit Chandler rather than expecting him to come up to town.
Chandler delivered a draft for Alfred Hitchcock's Stranger on a Train that the director deemed unusable. The script was completely overhauled, but Raymond still shared a screen credit. It was the last time Raymond Chandler had any personal involvement with the motion picture business. Up next, Raymond Chandler buries his wife, spends a fortune, and leaves Philip Marlowe hanging. Two-time Academy Award nominee Raymond Chandler quit Hollywood in 1946 to live a reclusive life in La Jolla, California with his invalid wife. On December 12, 1954, after 30 years of marriage, 82-year-old Sissy Chandler passed away following a long illness. Without his constant companion, Raymond Chandler became a Class A booze hound.
Sissy's being alive had kept Chandler together in many ways. He had no family identity, and the drink was always a danger for that. He could end up in the gutter, and he knew that once he was by himself. And Sissy's death just triggered that monumentally.
Novelist Carolyn C. teaches a college course on Raymond Chandler.
Well, it's well known that after Sissy died, Chandler made an effort to kill himself, but he didn't work very hard at it. He got totally roaring drunk and got in a bathtub and shot off a gun and took a big piece out of the bathroom ceiling and wept and rolled around some more in the bathtub and didn't really kill himself. You know, he just it was kind of a ritual fuss.
He did write another novel called Playback. The idea of Chandler sustaining a long writing career after Sissy's death was never really feasible because he didn't have the focus.
Playback was not exactly a hot seller. Still, Chandler was rolling in the dough thanks to royalties from his past efforts.
He embarked on a 5-year binge of international money spending and drinking and suicide attempts and bizarre marriage proposals, and all fairly messy.
Raymond Chandler's last years were not pretty. With no wife and no work, his only friend was the hooch. After one particularly memorable drinking binge, Raymond contracted pneumonia. Chandler died on March 23, 1959, at the age of 71.
He only had these two relationships. He didn't have friends. And so it was his fate to be alone. He was alone most of his life, and then at his death, he was alone too.
I think the last thing he was working on was Poodle Springs before he died. But his life really kind of went through kind of somewhat of a tailspin, and he really fit the bill as far as that, you know, towards the end of his career and life, it all kind of really bottomed out.
Author Robert B. Parker, creator of the Spencer detective novels and the television spin-off Spencer for Hire, completed Chandler's unfinished final work.
There was a manuscript floating around for a long time, and anyone interested in Chandler knew it, called the Poodle Springs story, about 13 pages long, in which Marlowe is married and living in the desert. The Chandler estate reached my agent and proposed that I finish that manuscript. But in fact, the first 4 chapters are Chandler, and the rest is me.
In 1989, Poodle Springs became a bestseller and a made-for-TV movie. A whole new generation was introduced to Philip Marlowe and Raymond Chandler.
I don't know if I'm a living legacy for Chandler or not. Certainly he is the greatest single influence on my own writing. We are not altogether alike, but I would be proud if someone thought I was his legate.
Chandler, in inventing Philip Marlowe in particular, helped to create a character who transcended his own neuroticism, his own ordinariness. I think we're all the better to have known him.
Whenever anyone thinks of London, they think of Dickens. And I think worldwide, if someone is a reader, when they think of Los Angeles, they think of Chandler.
Chandler once said that the average detective story is no worse than the average novel, except the average novel doesn't get published.
Raymond Chandler also said, everything written with vitality expresses that vitality. There are no dull subjects, only dull minds. And when it came to Raymond Chandler, there was rarely a dull moment. I'm A.J. Benza. Join me the next time we shine a light on the shadows of Hollywood, on mysteries and scandals.
I killed Dietrichson. Me, Walter Neff, insurance agent, 35 years old, unmarried, no visible scars. Until a while ago, that is. Yeah, I killed him. I killed him for money and for a woman.